Welcome everyone to the Ontario Caregiver Organization's webinar series. These webinars bring together caregivers and subject matter experts to explore topics of interest to caregivers. And we do this to support and engage chosen family, friends, neighbors, really anyone who's caring for someone else. My name is Katie Muirhead, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. And before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands that we're on today. While we meet on a virtual platform with people joining us from across the province, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. I'm joining you today from the city of St. Catharines in the Niagara region, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the lands that you're joining from, we invite you to find that information at native-land.ca. So our webinar today is called Planning a Positive Transition to Long-Term Care. Change can be challenging, especially for older adults and seniors who are considering transitioning into a long-term care community. This process can also be confusing. It can feel overwhelming for caregivers as we navigate a large amount of information along with managing all of the other caregiving roles and emotions that we experience. So today we're joined by Family Councils Ontario, or FCO. They're going to tell us a little bit more about long-term care homes, how they operate. We're going to talk more about how caregivers can get support from the long-term care team, what Family Councils Ontario does, and what resources are available for caregivers. They're also going to share more about their transition project tool, which supports caregiver knowledge experience with best practices, and hear caregivers' experiences and stories. So we have three folks from Family Councils Ontario joining us today. We've got Sam Peck. Sam is the executive director of FCO and has been helping long-term care caregivers form effective peer support groups since 2008. He's passionate about the power of peer support and helping council members and home staff form positive and productive relationships. We also have Leanne Pellissier joining us from FCO. She's currently the client services manager, but before that, Leanne worked in long-term care for about 19 years as resident and family services coordinator, helping support residents and families as they transition into long-term care. Leanne pairs the experience with lived experience as well as a caregiver to support caregivers and family councils to improve the quality of care and the caregiver experience in long-term care. And last but not least, we have Kathleen Edwards, who's also going to be joining us. Kathleen brings years of experience as a post-secondary educational instructor to her role as education manager at FCO. She creates informative and engaging education materials for council members and home staff, and her passion for supporting families and advocating for inclusion draws inspiration from her work as a recreational professional in long-term care. So I want to turn it over now to Sam to get us started.
Thank you so much, Katie. So I'm joining from Hamilton. So hello to fellow Hamilton area folks. And that's actually the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. So that is where I am in my home office today. So Katie's done a little bit about our session objectives for the day. But if I could wrap it up with one idea, it's to respond to what was said in the chat of everything's new and scary. And I want to, and for the folks who are feeling that way, I am so glad you're here with us today, because our overarching objective is to make it less scary, to make you feel comfortable, more comfortable about supporting someone who might be on the trajectory to long-term care, and to tell you about the supports and the services that are available to you as you go on that journey. So thank you so much for being here. I hope by the end of it, it's a little less scary. So these are our objectives. And today, which is October 17th, is the day that we launch our resource to help you plan and learn more about transitioning to a caregiving role in long-term care. So you are the first audience that we are sharing this with. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Just want to tell you more about who we are. So we work with long-term care home residents' families. And when we say family, we are using the broadest possible definition. So that is biological family, family by marriage or relationship, chosen family. It's anyone who a current or prospective long-term care resident considers their family. So that's what we mean by family. So we work with them, family councils and home staff in the over 640 long-term care homes in Ontario to improve residents' quality of life. And even more broadly than that, the experience of residents, caregivers, families, and home staff. We do a lot of education, training, consultations, networking events. We engage in a lot of research and system planning, all with the goal of helping families and councils create systemic change to create a long-term care system that we can all be very proud of. We're a resource for caregivers and homes and community partners. And even if you call us and there's something we can't directly help with, we might be able to refer you to the right organization. We try to be a door that opens that you can walk through and find a variety of things. Even if we're not the right ones, we can help you with that. A little bit more about our services. So I talked about our consultations. We do tons of workshops and webinars. We have a conflict resolution program where we help councils and home staff to work through issues. We have I will say, fantastic weekly e-bulletin update where you can find out tons about what we're doing, as well as our partners like OCO and others. We have a blog that we're just revamping now for some more education. Fantastic e-learning modules to help you understand, hopefully, when you join a long-term care community and become an excellent family council member, how to do that. And we have a lot of events in person and online, as well as, and this might be something of particular relevance to you, is we have an online directory of family councils who want to share their information with you and the world. So if you're thinking about a long-term care home or perhaps joining a long-term care community, you can check out that directory to see who a family council, if there's one there that they've published, and get connected with them for that really important peer support. Because councils are such a valuable element of the long-term care community and can really benefit caregivers and others in the home. So what's a family council? Why should you want to join one if you're on that trajectory? They're organized, self-led, and self-determining democratic groups composed of family, friends, and other persons of importance to the residents of a long-term care home. We figure that since you're attending this session, that long-term care is on your mind. And as FCO, our primary goal is to help caregivers and home staff champions to develop effective family councils. So I hope that you'll learn about family councils before your person moves into long-term care, so you know how you can benefit and get involved. Now, councils are different. I can't tell you that at the home your person might join, it'll be the same as somewhere else, but there will be characteristics that you can look for and how it'll benefit you. Council members come together and interact with one another regularly. You get that really valuable peer support. You have a same sense of belonging or a purpose. There'll be some common goals and objectives and some structure, rules, and methods of operation, just so everyone knows what path you're walking together. Now, why should you care about this? What are the benefits? If you join the family council of your person's home, you'll have a place to go for questions. We know that when you join a long-term care community, everything is new and scary. Family councils can help you with that. They can help you through that transition, that really tough period of joining this new place where you don't really know, but you will soon, what to expect. They also help to improve and maintain relationships between families and staff, to create a place where caregivers and care partners within the home, the paid staff, work well together. It is where you get peer support, where you learn, where you discuss issues of shared concern, and as a group have a shared voice for what you suggest to make this long-term care community better for your residents. Now, for many, many years, in my years with FCO, going back to 2008, I've made a joke at presentations. I ask, um, show of hands, who got the what to expect in long-term care resource guide? And there would be a pause and there'd be laughter because until now, it didn't exist. And so as FCO, we realized this is a huge gap. Like people don't know what to expect in long-term care. And what does that create? It creates unmet expectations. It creates a sense of everything's new and scary. So, how do we help people? How do we help caregivers better understand what to expect so that when they join a long term care community along with their resident, they are better prepared. They have the knowledge they need. They can be effective partners with the home staff, and they can join family councils and help and get the help they need, the support, and also use their skills and expertise to make a difference in this new community that you're a part of. So there's been continuous demand for additional resources and supports that we've identified. So we decided we're going to fix this problem. We're going to fill this gap. An ambitious project started with data collection through a survey in spring of 2023. So keep in mind, it's now fall 2024, and focus groups last year, where we asked families, what do you want to know? What are those gaps? What were your expectations moving in? So that way we could create something that was really driven by the needs of caregivers. And we are so pleased to release that today. And now, to tell you more about our focus groups and the stories we heard, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kathleen, who's going to take it from here. Kathleen, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, so again, we did extensive consultations, a survey, as well as a number of focus groups, which were transcribed and analyzed using a coding software. And here's a few quotes from families that really stood out. And I read in the chat that someone said they just went through the process of supporting someone moving in yesterday, and it was overwhelming. And part of that is really just that knowledge gap, the limited information that you have about long-term care going in. And that is really one of the things that stands out in these quotes. So one caregiver said, I knew nothing about long-term care prior to my family members moving into long-term care. Someone else said, family members are kind of sitting ducks in terms of lack of knowledge and information going in. Nobody tells you that ahead of time, so you don't have that kind of information to help you make choices or even feel a little bit confident that you're doing the right thing and you're working towards a good decision. And when it comes to what helped and supported the navigation and shift to a role as a caregiver in a long-term care community, caregivers did speak to the role of staff and specifically the leadership of the home, saying it's the administration and the core management team that set the attitude to make sure there isn't an us versus them in terms of family members being the problem and creating barriers versus where you can have great collaboration. And again, the importance of a very strong, consistent experience of the move-in day. Without a solid move-in day or admission process that educates and creates a relationship with the caregiver, we feel lost, alone, afraid, and unable to deal with our grief. This manifests in the unnecessary attitude of us against them. So again, this really does point to the need of our resource that we're sharing with you today. And to support that, within our resource, we are going to share a few narratives throughout that will help you kind of connect with and walk you through the process through different caregiver experiences. So the first caregiver you will meet is Angela and Marie. Angela is Marie's niece. Angela is her aunt's power of attorney, as well as substitute decision maker. Marie was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 10 years ago, and until recently, she was thriving in a retirement community. As Marie's dementia progressed, the staff frequently raised concerns with Angela about her aunt's safety. The staff have encouraged Angela to consider paying for additional supports for Marie, or that it's time to begin the process to apply to long-term care. Another caregiver you'll meet in the next slide is Jose, Isabella, and Carlos. So Jose is a long-haul truck driver living in a small town in central Ontario with his wife, Isabella, and their 2 teenage children. After the passing of Jose's mother, his father Carlos moved in with the family. Carlos recently had a stroke and is in the hospital undergoing rehabilitation. While Jose has explored the possibility of renovating his home, unfortunately, he discovered it's a long and complicated process. The staff at the hospital advised him the next best option is to apply for a bed in long-term care. So these are 2 examples of some stories that you'll encounter throughout our resource. So specifically, what is long-term care? A long-term care home is a setting where people with complex health care needs like diabetes, arthritis, or Alzheimer's disease, or other types of dementia live. In Ontario, a long-term care home is funded by the Government of Ontario, specifically through the Ministry of Long-Term Care. The Ministry of Long-Term Care issues a license or permit to operate a home to a municipality, a non-for-profit or for-profit organization. The Ministry of Long-Term Care also provides subsidies for lodging, which is the space where people live in long-term care, food, and staff to provide a range of health and support services. The goal of the services and supports provided by staff in long-term care to residents is to promote as much independence as possible for as long as possible, and to ensure the best quality of life for each person living within that long-term care community. As much as we'd like to see a world where there is no need for long-term care, as some of the stories indicate, they were created to continue to exist to meet needs. Long-term care homes are needed because of the physical design of homes within the community. Even with expensive renovations, they are often unsuitable to provide the level of care needed to support individuals, especially with dementia as it progresses. It can be quite strenuous on caregivers to continue to provide support to someone. The growing presence of cognitive impairments and chronic conditions managed by multiple medications and complicated interventions that required skilled care, and the availability of someone to provide them with consistent care throughout the day represents another reason why long-term care homes are needed. So what is the Fixing Long-Term Care Act? So you will come across this term within our resource, and you'll hear about it when it comes to long-term care. The Fixing Long-Term Care Act came into effect in April 11th of 2022 and replaced one piece of legislation, the Ontario Long-Term Care Homes Act of 2007. The Fixing Long-Term Care Act is the legislation that governs all long-term care homes in Ontario. And the Act includes recommendations generated after 2 years of increased attention in the long-term care sector, public consultation with residents, families, staff, and recommendations from reports including the Ontario Patient Ombudsman and the Ontario Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission. So what exactly is the difference between a retirement home and a long-term care home? So in retirement homes, they're privately owned residences that are focused on providing residents with independence and flexibility in the services that they're provided. So very often people will move in and it's very much like a condominium. So they have their own private space and rooms, which they have a key and can lock. and there's limited access for people. They can opt to clean the space themselves or to have staff from the home come in and clean the space for them. They can opt to cook in their own unit or where they're living, or they can opt to dine in the dining hall. Within retirement homes, they are governed by the Retirement Homes Regulatory Authority, or RHRA. Residents really are the ones who dictate their schedules within retirement homes. They decide when they want to get up, what they want to do with their day, if they want to interact with other people, or if they just want to stay within their own private space. And again, there's a wide range of cost in what the accommodations would be. So again, the prices will vary depending on the community where you're living, the services that you want, all of the bells and whistles that you may want to have in the home where you'd be living. And again, there's no funding from the government within retirement homes. Within long-term care, there's a mix of both nonprofit, municipal, and for-profit ownership. So there's different types of ownership. However, one thing they all do have in common is that they're governed and funded by the Ministry of Long-Term Care, as well as the Fixing Long-Term Care Act. And again, there's a standardized cost of accommodation with subsidies available. So again, the rate that someone will pay or co-pays for a private room or for a semi-private room is going to be consistent across all long-term care homes in Ontario. And you will find specific information about the cost of accommodations within the guide. So I am going to share, this is a very lovely infographic, again, just outlining the difference between retirement homes and long-term care. And this was created by a colleague of ours or a partner of ours that will be featured in the resource Eldorado. And what they do is they are a website that when you are looking for long-term care homes or retirement homes, it will allow you to search within your specific community and give you details and information about those specific places. So again, this is just another infographic to highlight the difference between a long-term care home and retirement home. Oop. Just going to my next slide. So requirements to apply for a bed in long-term care. As both examples shared earlier, Marie and Carlos are eligible to apply for a bed in long-term care. They meet the age requirements when it comes to their safety and supports with activities of daily living. Both of them have a specific need to move into long-term care. So these are the requirements to be able to submit an application. You need to be over the age of 18, have a valid OHIP or Ontario Health Card, need support with tasks like eating, bathing, or getting dressed, require on-site monitoring for their safety and well-being. So for someone with dementia, if they're prone to falls because they now, struggle with their leg strength, they've experienced a stroke, but they forget that they had a stroke. So they tend to try to get up and walk on their own, but they're prone to falling. They might require on-site monitoring just to make sure that if they fall, they are able to get support in getting back up, getting back into bed, getting back into their chair. Again, they may be unable to return home when they're discharged from hospital, mostly because it's challenging to be able to renovate a home, or the cost of renovations within the home that they could return to. It's quite significant. The timeline to be able to access the materials to make those renovations is quite significant, and again requires available on-site nursing care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So again, for both Marie and Carlos, as you read their stories, it will again demonstrate why they are eligible to apply for long-term care. And I will say beyond this, so in the case of Carlos, because he does not have a cognitive impairment per se, he's just experienced a stroke and has physical needs. When it comes to the process of submitting an application, his son would need to speak to him about applying and get his consent to apply. In Marie's case, because she has dementia, Angela would not need her consent because she has her power of attorney, as well as she's a substitute decision maker. So for people with cognitive impairments who are unable to make decisions on their own when it comes to their personal care, then their SDM or power of attorney would need to be the one who would submit the application. And that's what I'm going to talk about next is the application process itself. So this graphic is not one we created. It is from Ontario Health at Home, and it is also within our resource. And it demonstrates and shows you visually all of the different steps that go into applying for a long-term care bed. So where do Jose and Angela begin the process? For Jose, he's referred to Ontario Health at Home by the staff at the hospital, and for Angela as a power of attorney for her aunt, she can make that referral herself. Jose may have additional support from staff at the hospital in completing the application for Carlos, and because of his situation, Carlos may receive an offer from a home that is not on his preferences list. If Carlos accepts the offer of a bed from a home that's not on his list, he'll still be on the wait list while he temporarily moves into a long-term care home that has an available bed and can meet his current care needs. Angela will complete the application with the support of a care coordinator at Ontario Health at Home. She'll work with staff to arrange time to complete the assessment. She'll visit homes with her aunt and discuss homes that are on her preference list with her aunt. She'll then submit her list, and while they wait for an offer, the care coordinator may find additional supports for Marie to ensure that she's safe and comfortable in her retirement community while she waits for an offer of a bed in a long-term care community. Another exciting aspect of this resource is that we do use these case studies to show you how can you have a conversation with someone about moving into long-term care. We do show the example of having a conversation with someone with a cognitive impairment, but also if you are going to be supporting someone who would need to provide their consent, how do you have the talk, as Jose and Carlos do? So again, this image shows how to have the talk. So it's a conversation between Jose and Carlos. And again, it really walks you through the process from Jose's perspective as a son and Carlos's perspective as a father. How do you have that conversation to be honest and to tell them that unfortunately you're doing the best that you can to try and meet their wishes. It's just not possible given their current situation, and that long-term care unfortunately is a necessity to make sure that they have the best quality of life possible. So the resource will provide you examples of caregivers engaging in those conversations and supporting each other. And now I get to pass it over to my colleague Leanne Policier, who's going to continue to talk about the resource as well as share a little bit about her own perspective.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. In the next couple of slides, we're going to focus on supports available to caregivers and reflect on the emotional journey when you move a loved one into long-term care. You'll notice that we've listed some internal and external supports that are available that may bring some comfort to caregivers through their journey. If we look back to the story of Jose and Carlos, Jose was unsure what he can do to support his father. He can make use of the existing resources within the long-term care community. For example, as listed here, a good place to start would be to be in contact and speak with a social worker, if there's one on staff, to help during the move-in process. And they'll be able to listen to his experiences and point him towards resources and strategies that may help. If Jose prefers the support from others who've been through the process as a caregiver, supporting a resident as they moved into a long-term care, he can seek out peer support from other families in the area where Carlos is living. When he's visiting or attending meal times, he can get to meet other family members in the community. He can also find out if there's an active family council in the home, and he can attend meetings and seek their support. Some homes engage family councils in the move-in process and have them involved in giving tours or greeting new residents and family members as they arrive on the move-in day. Next slide, please. So this is my story. And as Katie pointed out during the introductions, I worked in long-term care for 19 and a half years, but I was also the caregiver to my dad and my grandmother, who both lived in long-term care. And I'm just going to share the emotional journey and how impactful and a realization that was for me when I had to make that decision to move my dad into a long-term care home. So this is my dad, and he was everything to me. And we had such a close relationship, and he taught me so many valuable lessons. My dad was fun-loving, gentle, and a soft-spoken man. He loved music and movies, and he was a musician and played in a band for about 25 years. He was also a chartered accountant and was a genius in math, and his family was very important to him. When my dad got sick and was diagnosed with dementia, it was devastating to our family. Having the experience of supporting residents with dementia and seeing the progression on a daily basis, it made me sad and so scared for my dad's future. I had to use my skills and training to communicate with my dad and also teach my mom and family how to better communicate and respond to my dad as his dementia progressed. The date came when my mom could no longer look after him safely at home, and we had to make the very difficult decision of moving my dad into a long-term care home. That is a day I will never forget. It was a pivotal moment in both my personal and professional life. As we drove my dad to his new home, my heart was racing, my mind was full of uncertainty and fear. I was caught off guard by these emotions. After all, this is what I did for a living, and this was my job. I welcome new residents and families into long-term care on a weekly basis. But this was so different because it was my dad. This was my family, and I was now a family member. What a reality check that was. My dad's move-in day was filled with all the so familiar paperwork, sharing information and meeting new staff. And I remember standing in my dad's room, watching him putter, fidget, looking confused and lost. And I can hear my mom crying in the background, not at all registering what was happening. There were many staff that came to my dad's room that day to introduce themselves. I can tell you I saw them. I knew they were talking, but could not hear one word they said. I was so overwhelmed and lost. And I know that I signed many forms, and I knew those forms like the back of my hand, but that day I had no clue what I was signing. My mom and I left my dad in his new home, in his shared room. We told him that the doctor wanted him to stay because they needed to do some tests. He couldn't understand why he couldn't leave with us. And at that moment, my two worlds collided. I was a resident family services coordinator who was responsible for the move-in process at the home I worked in. But on this day, I was a daughter, and the emotion of it all was overwhelming. I felt completely lost. I literally sat in my car for about a half hour and cried. I couldn't drive. I needed to get back to the home where I worked and continue my day of supporting residents and families and staff. Once I gained some composure, I vowed in that moment that I would do things differently. I would engage, respond, and emphasize differently. Although I often spoke the words, I never knew the impact, the deep emotional impact of moving a loved one into long-term care. It's quite funny. I told my colleagues that I didn't want to be one of those family members. I knew the sector, I was educated and skilled, but let me tell you, there were times when I was that spicy jalapeno family member. I totally got it. I was so overwhelmed, tired, stressed, and sad and grieving that my responses to certain situations was not ideal. I can guarantee you that there were times when staff scattered when they saw me coming, and I'm not a malicious person. I often caught myself slipping because, after all, this was my dad, and I loved him beyond words. Many times I needed to take a step back and take a deep breath and reflect on the situation at hand. I needed to problem solve and have a conversation with the nurse on how my dad's care plan can be adjusted to ensure that his particular needs were met. I needed to put trust in the staff that were looking after my dad and that they were doing everything they could to care for him. But watching him deteriorate was heartbreaking, and I didn't always know how to cope. The good days, however, were to be celebrated. My dad had some great moments and days of clarity. He loved to joke with the staff, play his air guitar, and sing Elvis tunes. He would tip his hat and greet people as he walked in the corridor. That was my dad. Going through the ups and downs of being a caregiver to a loved one in long-term care has helped put things into perspective for me. And that shared lived experience helped me completely understand families go through on that move-in day. And families need so much support, empathy, guidance, and understanding. The emotions are real, strong, and overtook all my senses at times. But recognizing the emotional impact of my role as a caregiver, as well as working in the long-term care sector, I knew that it was important to find strategies to manage my emotions, and self-care was key in managing stress and emotions. Next slide, please. So a very helpful resource to help with managing those emotions and really getting a handle on navigating through the emotional journey of long-term care is the book Now What by Deborah Batke. Deborah also has lived experiences of having moved her parents and husband into long-term care. The perspective, as well as the emotions she shares in this book, helps provide guidance and comfort to families that are navigating the emotional journey when moving a loved one into long-term care. We also highlight Deborah's book in our guide to offer more supports when dealing with the emotional impact. Next slide, please. We're so excited and proud to be able to introduce and launch and discuss our long-term care navigation guide with all of you today. It's a very comprehensive resource written to provide information based on where you are in your journey. It includes narratives shared throughout this session to help demonstrate caregivers' experiences as they navigate the move to long-term care. We also have a very comprehensive list of resources to help you along. And this guide will continue to evolve and expand as the long-term care sector evolves. Next slide, please.
Okay, and I think that is back over to me. Thank you, Leanne. I've been keeping an eye on the chat throughout our time together, and just folks who are saying about, just how the waiting time and how overwhelming it is to go through the long-term care trajectory. And people saying, my mom moved in a couple weeks ago, I'm still crying about it. And, comments about how you only have a little bit of time to really make that decision with your person or on their behalf once you get the call about a space is available for your loved one. And is this the right fit? So that's what we're hoping that our guide will help you prepare for. And now we know that all of you are going to be at different points in your journey in navigating the move to long-term care. Some of you, it's imminent, it's next week. Some it's a couple weeks ago. Some you really don't know. So our goal was to create a comprehensive guide where you could find that information before you need it. So as you prepare to use this guide, which I really hope you all take advantage of, whether you're a current or prospective caregiver to someone in long-term care, we want you to reflect on a couple of things. What do you want to know before you or your family member, your person, moves into a long-term care home. So we really want you to reflect what's like, do you want to know about how more about it's funded, what the day-to-day is going to be? Who are all these staff that are going to be helping my person? Do you want to know more about resident safety? So you might want to think about inspections and compliance. When I originally envisioned this guide, I was thinking, oh, it'll be like 10 pages. It's about 100 because it's so comprehensive and because there's such a wide variety of needs for information. So we really want you to reflect, what do you want to know? And so that way you can use this guide and really be thoughtful about what information you want to focus on. And to help you, we also want you to reflect, how do you want to be involved as a caregiver after move-in day? Your relationship to your person, your caregiving role, are going to change. For some folks, they feel a sense of relief, which also might make them feel a little bit guilty, but that's the emotional trajectory of, okay, I don't have to do the day-to-day caregiving anymore. I can be a daughter again. I can be a spouse. I can be a friend. So that, think about, is that what you want? Do you want to be someone who assists at meal times? Is that the important piece of caregiving to you? And this is going to be different for everyone. But we really would want you to think, okay, what do you expect? How do you expect to be involved? How do you want to be involved? And I think, how often does it work for you to be in the long-term care home? When? Because that can also help to have discussions with your person, the person who's moving into long-term care. You can say, I'm going to come and have lunch with you on the weekends. I'm going to come for music night. Things like that you can have clarity about what you want and what your person would want. And also think, and I hope the answer to this question is yes, but how do you want to be involved in your home's family council, whether it's starting it or helping to sustain its activities? What resources do you want in order to be effective? What is your ideal role? So these are questions we really want you to reflect on and think about as you work through this guide, as you think about that long-term care trajectory, and as you have those discussions with your person about what the future holds. That's the content that we have for you today. So we really, really hope that you take advantage of the guide that we've put together, our labor of love, our gift to caregivers, and follow up with us. We're happy to help, and whether it's a referral back to OCO, a question we can answer, or a referral to one of our other partners, we're here to help. We know the trajectory, the journey, the transition to long-term care is tough, but that's what we're here to help you with. So thanks so much for your participation and a very active chat today. So thanks so much.
Great. Thank you to Sam, Leanne, and Kathleen for sharing a lot of really helpful information. Yes, the chat has been very active, so let's get right into our Q&A portion. So I'd invite Kathleen to join us again as well. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can, folks, and I might sort of summarize a few. So I apologize if we missed some, but if you have any lingering questions after this, our Q&A, please pop it in. And I mean, there's lots of questions about this guide and excitement. So the link was shared in the chat. We are also going to send the guide out as part of our webinar wrap up. So you'll get the guide, you'll get this recording and other resources as well into your inbox, so you don't have to hunt around for it. So let's go back to the beginning, a really sort of fundamental question that maybe we could clarify a bit more. Family councils, do they exist in every long-term care setting? How do they differ across different settings? And if a caregiver wants to connect with their local family council, how would they go about doing that?
Excellent question. Maybe I'll jump in. So, in Ontario, in long-term care, what the legislation says is that every home may have a family council. You might have heard of residence councils as well, and each home has to have one of those. But families are a little different because you can't force families to meet. What I would say is that our estimate is that at any given point in time, about 80% of the over 600 long-term care homes in Ontario have a family council. And so most do, but there's an ebb and flow because they're family led. 1 month might have a stellar family council, and then a couple months later it may have folded because folks have moved on often after their resident passes. So most have a council. If you join a home that does not have a family council and you're interested in starting one, we are the people to talk to. Or if you're thinking about, oh, I wonder if this home has one, we are the people to talk to. Our directory on our website can provide you with some great information about if the council has chosen to list themselves. But it's also something you might want to ask about on a tour. Ask the tour person, does this home have a family council, and how can I connect with them? Leanne, I see you nodding. I know from your lived experience as a staff in the home, what other advice would you give?
I think that's sound advice, Sam. And definitely, I think part of the goal of this guide is to empower caregivers to have that knowledge, to ask questions and to ask the proper questions when doing a tour, and not to be afraid to dig a little more and really find out how the home runs, and talk to other family members and residents and ask them about their lived experience in the home, because everyone's experiences will be different. So I think this guide will provide the necessary knowledge and close that knowledge gap, that the families don't know what they don't know, in terms of being able to really make a positive and well-informed decision when it comes to moving their loved one into long-term care. And yes, during the tour is the time to ask all the questions. And one of them definitely should be, does your home have an active family council?
Great tips and strategies. Yeah, the tour is a great time to sort of suss some details out, check out the activities, the amenities, but also ask some of these questions around what supports are available for a person, but also for you as a caregiver, and how can you be integrated into that process. You gave some great strategies about choosing the things that you want to stay connected with as a caregiver, if that's meal times or certain activities. And that's a great time to be asking those people providing those tours, sort of what does that look like, and what can your involvement be as a caregiver. We had a few, as I'm sure you noted, some comments around the pressures and stressors of those transition phases. And I'm going to maybe summarize some of it in a bit of a different way, and in asking, do you have any recommendations or tips for caregivers who are in a bit of a transition phase? So maybe their person's in hospital, the next step ideally would be long-term care placement. There's no bed available. Do you have any recommendations for folks in those scenarios, tips and strategies that they can bring to that situation to maybe make it a little less overwhelming, understand the next steps and processes clearly, and support them as best you can in those really difficult situations? So maybe Sam, I'll invite you to start us off there.
Yeah, I'm seeing just about a question really also about paperwork, and how overwhelming it is. So what we recommend, and I'll turn it over to Leanne in a moment, is go through the guide, really look at what are the things that you're going to be required to think about. So it is an overwhelming process. So start thinking about what paperwork do I need to collect? What conversations do I need to have? What personal items are the most important to my person that they might want to bring, like pieces of art, things like that, just to help prepare some of that. And I mean, I just want to keep promoting our guide and saying the information's there. But Leanne, you've lived this on both sides. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. And yes, just a little point of highlight in the guide. We do offer a section of things that you can do with your loved one while you're waiting for that long-term care bed. So suggestions like putting a photo album together, creating a memory book. As Sam said, having those discussions about what's important to your person and what they would like to bring to the long-term care home if they're able to do so. Think about making it a seamless transition. And remember, as a caregiver, if I can give one piece of advice, is remember to take care of yourself and remember those self-care measures and what's going to really help you to best support your loved one during that transition. If there's anything I learned being a caregiver, I thought, because that's what I did for a living, and at the time when my dad moved into long-term care, I had been doing this for 15 years, and I thought, I'm Superwoman. I can do this. This is what I do for a living. This is going to be a breeze. Boy, was I wrong. And I really had to take the time to step back to say, there were times where I had to say, I need a day for me, and that's okay. It's okay to step back and take a day for yourself. And I think in terms of preparation and supporting your loved one, I think that needs to be first and foremost, is really take the time to look after yourself and tell yourself that it's okay to take care of yourself and to take a day to just do that self-reflection and self-care.
Thanks, Leanne. Lived experience is always really helpful to hear, someone who's walked the walk and lived that life. So thank you for sharing that. There's been a few questions coming through around who actually like makes this happen. who gets my person from home or hospital or wherever into long-term care? And there's also been some questions around the role of Ontario, formerly the CCAC. The organization's name has changed, but now we think of them as Ontario Health at Home. So I'm wondering if someone wants to jump in and share sort of what is the really practical step of who puts the name on the list, and what might be Ontario Health at Home, formerly the LIN, formerly the CCAC's role. What role can they play in the long-term care transition?
Leanne, I'm going to put it back to you again. You're the expert in this.
So the Ontario Health at Home anyone can put in a referral. So you don't necessarily have to be a power of attorney or a substitute decision maker to put in a referral. What will happen next is that Ontario Health at Home will send a placement coordinator in the home, or at the hospital. They'll send, the social worker or placement coordinator to do an assessment. And the first thing to be determined is the capacity. Does the person have the capacity to make the decision of long-term care? That's the only thing they're looking for in terms of capacity. They're not looking to see if they're able to make financial decisions or any other decisions, just as they're capable of the decision of placement. If they are deemed capable of the decision of placement, then that person gets to decide and have input on their choices, at their facility choices, and whether or not they want to go to a long-term care home. Now, if the person is deemed incapable, then that shifts to the substitute decision maker or power of attorney. We also have all this information in our guide. What is a substitute decision maker? What is a power of attorney? Because it's very complex. So there's a hierarchy for the substitute decision maker who is eligible to make those decisions. And then the power of attorney is a legal document where a person appoints someone to make decisions for them. And it's someone that they trust and someone that they have faith and confidence in that will make the right decisions for them. So that's the first initial step, and that's who gets to make the decision.
Great. Thank you. It can really feel overwhelming. You talked about your experience working in the system and feeling overwhelmed. when having to sort of navigate it from a caregiver lens. And so for those of us who have no experience in this space, having a really clear starting point is so important. And it sounds like this guide might be the magic key to that for a lot of us on the call today. And so thinking about how we can leverage the guide and the resources you've thoughtfully pulled together for folks. Really mindful of time, and we didn't get to answer everyone's question, but I'm going to wrap up with one final question, which might sort of be helpful. Someone asked, does FCO have counselors that can get you information over the phone? Maybe not a counselor, but somebody to connect with if you have those questions. Is there a role of FCO for the everyday caregiver to sort of call and say, I'm really confused. What's my next step here?
Absolutely. And sometimes that answer might be call OCO. It might be, but our mandate is to support the development and sustainability of family councils in long-term care homes. That's where we spend 95% of our time. We're also not going to turn away someone who is confused about long-term care and caregiving. We may not be the ones who have the answer, but we'll do some research. I've sat on the phone literally Googling things to try to give people the help they need. So yeah, we're not counselors. We don't do counseling. We'd perhaps refer you back to OCO probably to provide support through their services. But our info at fco.ngo email address, our direct, our primary phone, that's going to go to Leanne. I'd say call her. She's a great listener. She's got great experience and expertise. If we're not the ones to answer the question, we'll try to help you figure out where to go.
Great. Thanks so much, Sam and Leanne and Kathleen, for joining us today and providing this really helpful information. This is certainly an area that caregivers need as much support as they can as they navigate through this. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our talk today and just say thank you for your expertise and for sharing your personal experiences. It really does make a huge difference for folks when they can see themselves in other people. So thanks again for taking time with us today.